Hi, folks. We're going to start in a minute or two. Just bear with us.
Hey.
Hello. How are you?
Good.
Sweet.
What's up, girl?
Camera on session.
Yeah. Alright, I think we can get started. Oh wait, Carl is reconnecting. Is it really a session if there's no tech glitches, right? All right, sweet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, well, welcome everyone. GM. We are back with another session and another great group of builders. Today, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into Infra for Ethereum Data and our projects that are solving for that. We've got some phenomenal builders here, and we're going to get into that. But just a reminder that our allocation window is open, and it's going to be open all the way up until 25th of July. Or I'd say 24th, depending on where you are, time zone wise. If you check Octant.app on your local browser, you'll see the exact time when the allocation period ends. And we're seeing a lot of changing rankings on the leaderboard, but that's because people's allocations are coming on. So please make sure you do allocate if you walk GLM. If you don't, you're going to be wasting rewards. We're not going to tell you what to do. You can take your individual rewards. Make sure you donate. Of course, I'm biased, so I'm going to say make sure you have more of an impact with the rewards that you get. But make sure you take a decision, because if you don't, your rewards are going to be wasted, and that's not fun. Another exciting update from the Octant side is we announced our vaults yesterday, our yield donating vaults. We're going to be sharing a lot more on that later on. Some fun reading, and we'll have that shared as a reply to this tweet. But with that, let's get started. I'm Michelle, heading marketing at Octant and doing a bunch of other behind the scenes stuff. And with me, I have Nico, who's going to be hosting today as well. Nico, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. Super excited about this new live stream with you all. I'm Nico. I'm doing community at Octant, and yeah, excited to chat.
Amazing. So let's start with intros. So introduce yourself and tell us more about what you're working on. Let's start off with Hayden from OrbitDB. Oh no, did we lose Hayden?
It looks frozen, yeah.
I think in that case, Bryce, do you want to go first?
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks for having us, Michelle and Nico. My name's Bryce. I'm one of the co-founders of EAS. I focus on all like the product operations, marketing growth, helping builders, and really just making sure that we keep on our theme, which is helping builders build faster right now. So excited to share kind of what we've been up to. If you're not familiar with EAS, I'm sure we're going to go into more detail, but it's a primitive that allows people to sign structured data or make things called attestations.
I'll go next, and then we can see if Hayden's able to introduce himself. Good morning, everyone. I love Octant. My name is Carl. I'm from OSObserver, one of the co-founders. I wear the data hat most of the time, and I guess we're going to be talking a lot about Ethereum data. So what that means on a day-to-day basis is that we are trying to measure the impact of open source software. And we're doing all of this in the open. So we've built infrastructure for combining different public data sets, a pipeline which allows you to connect them and extract and transform the data into metrics. And then we work with partners and funders to make sense of that and ideally put more funding into the projects that are having the most impact across Ethereum. That's a hard problem to solve. We definitely don't view ourselves as the expert in this. And so we're also trying to create a community of data scientists that are passionate about funding public goods better and want to contribute their own ideas for algorithms, metrics, or other ways that we can supplement the data to get closer to funding impact. And yeah, as I said at the beginning, I'll say this again, we love Octant. It's great. And it's a real pleasure to be with all of you.
Thanks, Carl, and thank you for that. Appreciate it, and appreciate you and the team as well. Hayden, are you with us?
Drop out, but I think I'm back online. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
So OrbitDB is a. Sorry, there might be a bit of a delay, but I'll see how I go. OrbitDB is a peer-to-peer, serverless, decentralized open source database system. It's built on top of IPFS and libp2p. They're the two technologies that we're using to run our database sync protocol. So that's the sort of technical jargon of it. What does that mean? It means that you can run databases local first. Means that you can store the data that you need to store for your application directly on the user's device or computer. You don't need to rely on third parties to store the data. You don't need to rely on centralized data storage. You can store it on your device, and then if you need to sync it to other devices, you can then do that without having to rely on a centralized server or centralized mechanism. That has a lot of applications. Obviously, it changes data ownership. So you see a lot of big tech companies exploiting this sort of centralized data storage. They're also much more prone to attack. If you own the data, if you produce the data, then you own the data with OrbitDB. It's obviously censorship resistant in that you're storing the data, you can distribute that data, and there's no intermediary party that can stop you from doing that. And there's also a persistence. So you're now using decentralized mechanisms in order to replicate that data and give it longevity. And so there's the benefits of OrbitDB. You start to then look at moving away from things like sign in and sign up and two-factor authentication and so forth, because you don't need to protect the data on a third party. The data is with you. What we're hoping is that we start to see OrbitDB being introduced into more of these decentralized applications, so that the entire stack, all of the layers, include OrbitDB as that data storage layer.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to hear your interests, and always super exciting to hear all the amazing projects that contribute to this larger thing that is Ethereum. And I would love to learn a little bit more about the origins of your projects. Like, how did the project start? What was the first sort of problem that you wanted to tackle? Maybe Bryce, you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So EAS really started to solve a problem that existed for a long time. When Ethereum first came out, it was, let's decentralize the entire world. Let's build like really amazing, cool tech for like land registries, voting systems, supply chains, like all these like really amazing ideas. 10 years later, obviously we are more focused on finance right now with like stable coins, DeFi, etc. Very important. But all these other elusive use cases, it made us think like, well, how come with all this like time and progress, we haven't really been able to, have these things? And so we're looking around the space and we're like, all right, well, if you want to have something like a land registry, you need some sort of authority to attest or to say that this piece of land actually is a parcel of land. Like if the government says it, then you can rely like this piece of land is that piece of land. So we were looking at identity protocols, and we realized just how fragmented the identity space was, because you have a handful of them, and they keep obviously coming up. And we realized like there can't just be one like governing identity protocol or body or something that says like this is your identity, because that just will never work. And so we started to think like, well, what actually is your identity? And at a philosophical level, and there was a philosophical exercise we did, and it was like, when you were born, you didn't have an identity, and then you did. So like, let's start all the way at the very beginning of things, of time. And we realized like, all right, well, you know, when you're born, you could say that your parents, they attested to your name. They said, you know, this is my son, Nico. And then the doctor attested to your date of birth, and then the teacher attests to your grades, and then, you know, you go to school and you attest to the friends that you like, and all these little micro interactions in life are just attestations about things. And so we realized like to actually solve something so nuanced and subjective and complex as identity, you can't just start with like an identity primitive. You have to start very quite simply just with a way for people to say things about things, which sounds really abstract, but that's like from that type of Lego block, you can build reputation systems, identity, land registries, and all these things. So it really started to kind of solve like, how do we actually add more utility around Ethereum and help us like, you know, win this? And we saw this as like a missing Lego block.
Cool. Thanks, Bryce. I'm hearing a bit of echo. I don't know who that is. That's okay. I think it's better now. I actually wanted to follow up quickly because you did mention identity, and maybe it's a bit of a spicy question, but it's you know, the meme that is like, okay, we have so many like plugs. Let's create a plug that is standardizes them all, and then you have an extra plug. Like, do you think EAS is fitting there somehow? Like, how are you approaching that?
The meme around like, oh, here's the standard, now we have like more standards for standards.
Exactly.
You know, it felt like that, you know, to be honest, at the beginning, because when we were first launching, I think EAS was a little misunderstood in the market, and so we had to do a lot of like groundwork and like a lot of like just you know, conversations and helping people understand like how to use EAS. And until we actually reach a point of legitimacy, I would say, like where we had protocols naturally adopting us, it was hard to prove like, hey, this is actually becoming a standard. And we actually did try to take the approach of going like the ERC routes early on in the days to like just go, hey, let's just create an ERC, and then we're labeled as a standard. But what we realized is it just created a lot of like slow movement, you know, a lot of different opinions, and no one really wanted to actually do the work. And so we realized like, well, let's just build it, and then like we can become a standard through adoption, like if it actually is like the right way to build it. And so I think, you know, originally, yeah, it kind of felt like that, but over time, just through adoption and stuff, we've been able to kind of like overcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to hear your answer first, but in my head, it's like EAS is kind of like a little bit bigger, or quite bigger than any other ID standard. Let's say, I don't know, the first ones that come to mind are like Firecaster or Lens, but yeah.
One other thing to comment on that is like, what we realized is that a lot of the identity specific ones are just solving one specific use case for identity. Like it could be like, you know, maybe it's just representing your actual like passport card, but like your passport doesn't say that you're an amazing like, you know, community leader for Octant, or that you have these skills or preferences or things. And so then someone else creates like, oh, I'm going to create my own identity for like community builders, like protocol. And then it's just like, it just continues from there. So we realize we have to go like one layer lower.
Yeah, makes total sense. Thank you, Bryce. And now to you, Carl. Same question. How did you start with OpenSourceObserver, and what was the problem that you were aiming to solve first?
Yeah, I'm gonna work backwards actually, because we are also heavy users of Ethereum attestation service. So a couple use cases. Every time a project applies for retrofunding or creates an identity in the Optimism ecosystem, they use a whole bunch of attestations to basically link different GitHub repositories, impact statements, contributors, etc. So we use all of that data. We also work with two other participants in this current Epoch, so BundleBear and Grow the Pie. They're using EAS to label contracts. Grow the Pie has a close partnership with us to identify the owner of projects and tie that back to, the owner of a contract and tie that back to a project identity. And then BundleBear has been doing kind of a specific use case around account abstraction and 7702 adoption. And all of that, again, is kind of stored using EAS. So we love EAS. We love the fact.
Thanks, Carl.
And we love the fact actually that there's these different public data sets that are being kind of community-led and curated. And as open source observer, we don't want to create a standard. We don't actually want to create any unique data of our own. All we want to do is the kind of invisible work of connecting all these different data sets and creating a data pipeline that allows you to make sense of them. So asking a question like, how many contracts has this project deployed? We can actually answer that by connecting two disparate data sets, and then hopefully using that to inform funding decisions or inform other kind of ecosystem growth decisions. That's where we are today, looking at a lot of data, trying to make sense of it. In a previous, we've been working at Open Source Observer for about 2 years. And previously, myself and my co-founder, Ray, we actually met at Protocol Labs, which is the organization that stewards IPFS and libp2p. So I guess we're coming full circle here. And we had believed that there was a kind of gap in the market for rewarding impact. People wanted that there's a lot of projects that are having an impact, and there are funders out there that are looking to incentivize more people to work on public goods and so on. But one of the missing links seemed to be, well, how do we actually measure how much value a project is having? And that is a very hard question to answer. There's a lot of literature about this. I don't want to get into that. And we also don't want to be the thought leaders when it comes to saying, this is a public good, that is not a public good. This is a Ethereum core, core repo or developer or dependency, et cetera, and this is not. We want to make it so that other people can have those debates, but hopefully they can point to a single source of truth or common data sets. And unfortunately, a lot of the hard work to do that is really around data engineering and just connecting different data sets, making it so that they can be layered on top of each other. In a previous life, I worked in kind of coffee and commodity supply chains. And it's a very similar problem where you have geographic data, you have demographic data, you could have trade or economic flows. And, this is partly another attestation plug. There isn't a single source of truth to say, this is a farmer or this is a plot of land that is owned by this person in this place. And so, again, my previous background was trying to make sense of all of that data. It was in a context where all of it was kept private. It was considered highly proprietary and highly valuable. And we also saw an opportunity in Ethereum to kind of flip that on its head and make it so there are actually incentives for people to maintain and contribute data sets as a public good because they could be useful for directing hopefully millions of dollars of funding. So yeah, that's where we are. Again, 2 years in, we've been almost entirely funded by grants and other public goods builders. And so we're, again, very, very grateful to be here with Octant and this wonderful cohort of other projects.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carl. I love when projects in the epochs are collaborating with each other or collaborated. That's awesome. Now on to you, Hayden. What's the origin of OrbitDB?
So I'm not quite sure where I got to previously before I ran into technical difficulties, but origin of OrbitDB started 10 years ago, well before I came into the project. It was founded by one of the ex-IPFS guys who recognized that you could do a decentralized chat. In order to complete the chat, though, we needed a database to store the to and fro messages. And hence OrbitDB was born in about 2015, I think. I came onto the project at various times, 2018, 2019. I could see the benefits of decentralized peer-to-peer data storage and local first data. And then about 3 years ago, I noticed the project was a very powerful project, but it was sort of floundering a bit. And so my aim was to come back on board and have the goal of reinvigorating the project and getting it to a production release. And we spent the next 6 months, the founder and I, making sure that we had a nice, robust, rewritten piece of peer-to-peer software, database software. And then from there, we've just been adding new functionality to it. We've recently included modular encryption. And so from our perspective, we've really kind of reached the completion of the original vision of OrbitDB, and now we're just taking in new directions and adding new functionality. And I think the most important thing for us is getting it into the hands of developers, and so they can more easily get it up and running and start integrating into their applications. I think one of the problems with peer-to-peer technologies is it requires a different headspace, and it can be very difficult to implement because it's more complex than client-server architecture. So that's sort of the new direction that we're taking OrbitDB.
Amazing. And speaking of getting it into the hands of builders, tell us more about what kind of tech you're seeing built, who are the builders that are building, and any interesting use cases that you've come across in terms of the builder side of things.
Yeah, over the past 10 years of the project, I mean, it has been integrated into technologies that many users, especially in the cryptocurrency space, would have used before. So if you're, once upon a time, we're verifying contracts with Sourceify, that would have been OrbitDB. MetaMask at one stage had OrbitDB integrated into it. And for various reasons, it's no longer used, but there's always scope for it to be reused again. Recent development, we've got decentralized peer-to-peer media platforms, so sharing videos. One of our users has built kind of where you've got movies that are coming to the public domain, they're out of copyright, and he's distributing those movies and storing a lot of information, metadata, and so forth within OrbitDB with a kind of vision of integrating in user logins, user settings, and so forth, but in a local first peer-to-peer data storage using OrbitDB. A lot of interest in things like building blockchains using OrbitDB as the backend, because then your syncing of the data is taken care of by OrbitDB and the technology underpinning it, libp2p, IPFS, so that that replication functionality you no longer have to worry about. So there's some interesting use cases, some academic concepts. Decentralized archive, institutional and academic archiving is another one that's started to be built out. So there's some interesting use cases there.
Love that. And speaking of use cases, Carl, we're big fans of like the retros that you do with the different funding rounds and even the Octant wins. Tell us more about the data set side of things. Who are there builders that are currently using different tools, just working with you all in terms of getting different aspects? Oh, sorry, I have one of my AirPods that fell out. Tell us more about the builders that are working with these data sets. Anything interesting that's come up? Yeah, would love to. Yeah, let's really dig into it.
Yeah, I will say that this finds me in the middle of like the mother of all analyses or blog posts right now. So I've been kind of working on this for almost a month right now. But as a bit of context, there have been two retro funding rounds that have been happening over the past 6 months or so in the Optimism ecosystem. What they're doing is a pretty interesting experiment. It draws a lot of inspiration from deep funding, which is something that the Ethereum Foundation has been sponsoring over the past year or so. And the idea is trying to create a large graph that shows on-chain projects and then all of the developer tools or dependencies that enable them to be successful. Now, we have tried to construct a version of that graph, and then we've also tried to assign different weights to nodes in the graph based on how much economic value they transport or how recently they have been updated or maintained. And we are now trying to kind of make sense of the amount of funding that has gone to projects and trying to give some measurement to, for instance, what would it cost to replicate all of this infrastructure? If you basically said every single on-chain builder no longer has access to open source software, and they have to build all of the tools that they depend on, like ethers and open Zeppelin contracts and EAS and OrbitDB from scratch, what might that cost? Which is a hard question. And we don't want to have a precise answer because I don't think there really is a good precise estimate. What we are trying to do is come up with a set of boundary conditions. And so you can imagine what like the minimum cost might be, and you calculate that by basically saying, here's all the work that went into this, all the publicly visible work that went into this. And here's an average developer salary. Let's multiply those two. Now, before the alarm bells go off, I know that that's, again, a very, very low minimum estimate. You can also do the same thing to get a upper estimate, which is basically, now let's look at all the projects that depend on this. What would it cost them to replicate it? And so you multiply the cost per project by all the projects that depend on it. And that gives you an upper estimate. Obviously, the true answer is maybe somewhere in the middle. And then the question becomes, well, what is a effective amount of funding to give to teams that encourages strong developers to keep maintaining, innovating, contributing, but also doesn't cut out the space? Because I don't think what we want to see is 10 years from now, everybody's building developer tooling, but there aren't any applications that are using that developer tooling. So yeah, I'm in the middle of that right now. Again, one of the things that we love about Ethereum is that so much of the data is public and accessible and allows you to try and answer really hard questions like this. One thing that we're excited about is the potential for researchers to be nerd sniped by this. I don't consider myself a econometrician or even like a good data scientist, but hopefully people will see my work and poke holes in it and get inspired to do some kind of further analysis. And hopefully, again, that can inform bigger changes in how we ensure that all of this infrastructure and tooling can be sustainably funded in the long run. So yeah, that's the big thing I'm working on right now. Hoping to have the pieces out in the next couple of weeks or so, and we'll definitely send them your way. And again, if you were to, we could slice it so that we just look at the part that Octant is funding. My sense, almost 90% confident, is that Octant is really funding an outsized amount of the kind of critical infrastructure that Ethereum depends on. So kudos to you. And we'd love to continue kind of collaborating in ways to highlight that impact, not just on like the immediate projects that are being funded, but everyone who is downstream from them and depends on this valuable infrastructure.
Absolutely. And I think as a grant nerd and just as like a researcher, I feel like it is a dream to see your work being used for further research and just making it more usable, actionable, and just seeing practical tools and what not come out of it. So I think like that in itself is already an achievement. And I think what's been really great is, and I really recommend go check out Carl's Twitter and the OSObserver blog, because there are some really, really interesting deep dives. Even with some of our past epochs, that's been quite cool to read. And the optimism ones, of course, the ones that you share have always been really, really insightful. Anything on the deep funding side, or even with like the retro rounds that Optimism has been running that you can share with us before you also, I know you're going to publish a bigger piece, but anything that's top of mind that you can also share with us here?
Yeah, so I think that deep funding is a really interesting experiment because it's actually trying to take the work of determining how valuable a project is or any node in this graph and get the community to build their own models and algorithms and have them effectively compete to come up with the right answer, and then have that answer reviewed by experts and human judges. So right now, there's been a lot of work around the kind of marketplace for algorithms and for people to compete and make sense of. It's a pretty large dependency graph. So which dependencies are most valuable? I think the part that is actually the bottleneck right now is getting good human judgment. There's research about this, but humans are actually terrible at making these kind of value-based decisions. If you were to say which of these two projects that you use on a daily basis is more impactful, and you're not able to make a side-by-side comparison of them, it's really, really, really difficult. And oftentimes these things are constructed where here's a list of 30 things, figure out exactly what percent each one should get of a funding amount. This is like a very, very difficult problem. And so I would say that right now, there's been a lot of work and innovation on getting the data and getting people to come up with different algorithms for ranking dependencies and so on. But I think it's very difficult right now for humans to effectively give them feedback and judge which allocations are better. And again, there isn't going to be one answer because people will bring all sorts of different ideals and value sets to this question. Some might say, I actually want to support innovative use cases that don't have a lot of funding. Others will say, there are teams that have taken significant salary cuts or, passed on other opportunities to work on this valuable infrastructure. And now that it is widely used, they deserved outsized funding. There aren't right answers for that. Again, that's like politics. People should be debating those types of things. But I would say, again, like the weak link right now in the process, at least in my opinion, is actually being able to get a range of subject matter experts to debate these things and actually have the ability to be precise about why they think something is more valuable than something else.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the most exciting part, is really just seeing different people and what they recommend, discourage, and really just seeing the different perspectives there, because that's always fun. Even as we internally debate stuff on what should get funded or what shouldn't at a leadership level, it's always interesting to see what each person and each group really leans towards and based off of experiences and their perspective. And so that's always fun to compare. Going over to you, Bryce, of course, and y'all are Epoch darlings, I want to say, because we've seen EAS get a lot of support from our community time and time again across different epochs. I'm literally looking at your website right now, and it says 8.5 million attestations that have been done by 450,000 unique attesters and 2.2 million recipients. Like, that's these are big numbers, right? I think if PMF, I feel like y'all have probably cracked it, and probably one of the best teams cracking PMF, if anything, in terms of actual usage. Tell us more about who's building and what are the interesting things that you're seeing attestations being used for, anything that stood out for you. What can you share? Like, there's just so much to talk about in terms of traction, but I would love your take on this.
Yeah, thanks. I think the coolest part about EAS is that we actually don't need a lot of attestations for them to be valuable, right? Like the metrics on the website are kind of like, they're kind of fun, like I personally enjoy seeing, like when there are a lot of them, but at its core, like if you were to ask Carl, data scientists, like measuring impact and stuff, you just don't need that many. We have builders from, the tier one kind of exchanges like Coinbase, Kraken, et cetera, making attestations, all the way down to like hackathon builders making attestations. And the cool part about an attestation is that it is subjective. Like the value that you place in the attestation itself is up to you to decide if it's valuable or not based off of who signs it. And so we see teams all the time that are creating like little micro like schemas, and they might attest to like attendance at their event, and their community, can rely on that attestation. But from a quantity thing, they might have made like, 15, 20 of them. But to them, it's like, it's very valuable. So I think the coolest part is like, there's a lot of value in each individual attestation, dependent on who's looking at it. And so some of the coolest things, that we've seen built adoption wise, it has been really nice to see, some of the tier ones push it and adopt open source software. When just originally starting to build it, and if you're a builder listening to this as well, you can kind of fear like, all right, well, who's actually going to be able to use this? Or like big companies just going to like, have this fear of like invented here syndrome and want to like build it themselves internally. And so it's really cool, and it's a testament to these larger institutions to actually like adopt open source software and to like build on top of it. And so seeing them adopt it has been really nice. And then I think the coolest integration that we've seen so far, one of them that I'm proud about, is the optimism integration. So because that was kind of a win from a standardization perspective, we were really trying to make sure that if we didn't want to fall into that trap Nico was talking about, now we have another standard to worry about. And so Optimism was actually building in their own direction. If you guys were around at this time, they were creating something called the attestation station. And we were like, wait, this is like, we've built to this. You guys should just use what we have. Then after like some back and forth and stuff, ultimately they decided to deprecate the attestation station and adopt the EAS protocol, and they natively integrated into the OP stack. So because of that, and because of the adoption of the superchain, it's been really amazing to see, like, you know, Base automatically had it, Unichain, like any open source, sorry, any chain on the superchain automatically has it by default. And because of that, it really helps standardization to start seeing like how we can have more interoperability between the chains and different types of things that can be attested to. But it's cool. So to kind of, the summary is really just like, it's not the quantity game that's like super interesting. It's like how people might use it for their own use cases. And that can be like a little hackathon builder, you know, just kind of messing around for the weekend, all the way up to like the biggest institutions. And we're just excited to see like how people will continue to kind of figure out what types of data matters to them.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Bryce. So my internet rocked me for a second there. Again, if you've been following, I've been struggling with the Polish internet in the last few live streams. Sorry about that. But yeah, thanks for sharing. Actually, would love to ask this question to Carl and Hayden as well. What is the most impactful thing for Ethereum that you think was that came out of your platform, either by yourself or by some builders who interacted with it? Carl, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I was thinking. I feel like we're at the point right now where I have yet to. I want to find like the single soundbite and say, here's the thing that is now different because of this. I don't know what that is. I think some of the things that I'm most passionate about, and probably means we need to do more writing and evangelizing this, is that ultimately, you know, Ethereum is a developer platform. Its users, first and foremost, are developers, not financial institutions, and so on. You know, those are downstream of that. But ultimately, the most important metric in my view is just how much developer activity is there on Ethereum and everything, you know, built on top of Ethereum. And if Ethereum wants to compete, you know, against cloud platforms, against Solana, against, you know, fill in the blank other ecosystem, it needs to be the place where developers of all flavors and backgrounds want to go to make their dreams come true. And I think what we've seen since the past, you know, since 2021 or so, when the market has been less, shall we say, high, is that, you know, developer attention has really shifted elsewhere. Maybe it's gone to AI, maybe it's gone to other ecosystems, maybe it's just, you know, it was never there in the first place and people have just gone back to whatever else they were doing. And so, you know, you don't obviously want to fund people just to tinker around on Ethereum, but you do want to see steady growth in developers building on-chain applications and unlocking new use cases and doing more things. And so we kind of look at that as a pretty important leading indicator of how healthy the ecosystem is. Another important indicator is, where is their churn? If what you're seeing is that every 2 years, a huge swath of developers just burn out, why is that? Is that because they don't like the tooling? Is that because they found other economic opportunities that are better elsewhere? Is it because they just don't like the culture around it? I don't know. Like, those are all important questions. But ultimately, if you view Ethereum as one big network state, one big, you know, global community, you want more people to be doing stuff. And again, we think one of the leading indicators of that is just the developer activity and wanting that number to go up. And I'm definitely very confident that that number goes up a lot. The price will follow and other good things will follow. But if it goes down, I think that creates a systemic risk to the success of Ethereum as a project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the entire security of the network relies kind of on price as well. So that is absolutely true. Luckily, we're pumping now. um, yeah, that's awesome, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna have some cool sound bites about that once, for example, the deep funding research comes out. So super excited about that. And Hayden, what about you? What do you think was the most impactful for Ethereum that came out of your platform?
I don't think we've really had much influence on Ethereum up until now. However, what impact will OrbitDB have on Ethereum going forward? Well, if it gets momentum, if it onboards the developers, it will have a huge amount of impact. It not just to Ethereum, but also to any to this move to decentralized applications. It will. There is no reason why OrbitDB can't be the data storage layer in the decentralized application stack, and obviously there's a lot of decentralized application development going on both within Ethereum and interacting with the Ethereum blockchain as well. One of the examples would be taking the ERC-721 token, I guess, where IPFS became the kind of default mechanism for storing those assets. There's no reason why we couldn't make the transition to OrbitDB being that storage mechanism, with the benefit that you have permanence in the OrbitDB database, but you have the ability for the data to change within the database, which, there's always a use case for not having static data, and sometimes you need to be updating that data. But with OrbitDB, of course, having a full history of what those changes might be and being able to verify those changes as well. So I think while we've slid around the edges with regards to OrbitDB having impact on the Ethereum ecosystem, but not really much until now. I think moving forward, hopefully, we see OrbitDB becoming more and more integrated and important to the Ethereum ecosystem, both from a development point of view and a data storage point of view.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, and if you need some support or need to jam on how to get to that point, how to get that adoption from developers, we're always happy to help brainstorm and happy to amplify that. There's also a bunch of great projects in the Epoch that I'm pretty sure will be very helpful to make that happen. So really looking forward to that.
For sure.
Bryce, I missed the last part of you of what you were talking about before, but like the optimism part sounded really, really impactful for Ethereum. But I want to give you the chance to mention maybe something if you wanted to. But I think you've kind of already answered.
Yeah, I think there's like that use case is cool, and it is impactful for standardization. But like, if really thinking about the question a bit more deeply, I think the most important part about EAS is that it allows us to decentralize more than just money and assets for the long term, and to have these like really cool use cases. Right now, we're still like, and I appreciate you, Michelle, saying that we have product market fit, but there's still so much that needs to get done, like so many cool use cases that are yet to be touched. And so as soon as like that starts to happen, then it'll really feel like we kind of hit this inflection point. But the most important thing right now that I see for Ethereum is like EAS gives a way for us to actually communicate what types of information can be trusted online. And like, as trust becomes way more scarce in today's world, right, especially online, like what links are safe, like what can we any interaction online is like subject to like some scam or like some misinformation. And so like being able to use these types of signals where you can sign data and let other people rely on it, and attestation, I think just allows us to start to build this more like trustful internet. And but we're still in like the early stages for that. And Ethereum is the world computer, so that's where everyone should ultimately like seek their trust, and using things like open source observer to like understand the data a bit more deeply, contextually, and even like storage with Hayden, as attestations could be made like off chain, they could be stored kind of through Hayden's system.
Absolutely, and Ethereum is indeed the world computer, as we all work towards that too. Um, Speaking of that, so now I want to kind of touch on some of the wins and roadmap milestones, right? I think for both for you, Carl, and for you, Russ, as well, this is a return, like this is not a returning epoch, but you've participated in a few past epochs, and one of the questions that we ask is um, what what are some milestones that have been achieved? What has been on the roadmap that you're proud and you really want to share? So, would love to kind of go back to where's the last 6 months. What has your team shipped? What is cool, and what do you want to share with the community? And also, just want to give a shout out to I see 130 views on our live stream, so thank you for staying with us. I know it's a Friday, and we are excited to have you on board. If you have any questions, type them here. If you reply, we're going to give you a shout out online too. We love our Octant community, and I know that a lot of folks also, for those of you who are going to join later, and I know a good chunk of you do that later. Thank you for watching up until this point, and hopefully you stay till the end. But yeah, go for it. Tell us more about like some of the wins and more from the roadmap perspective.
Happy to get started. I think one win is being alive, not dying. I think the past 6 months, 12 months have been very difficult, especially on public goods projects. And so funding from Octant is pretty vital in keeping the lights on. And I would say that there are probably other ecosystems that don't have that mentality that it's important to support public goods, or things that don't have a direct value capture mechanism. And Ethereum continues to be the exception. And Octant is a great example of that within Ethereum. So that's definitely one thing that we should all be happy for. I guess more specifically, I think that we have gotten pretty excited, specifically about the intersection of kind of hard data problems and where AI can help accelerate understanding. There's a couple different form factors that can take. One is just basically being able to query a data set and have an agent help you understand the schema, understand the table structure, understand how to do joins and things like that. Another example is making it so that the lift in terms of engineering and basic analysis or data cleaning can be dramatically reduced, and much more time can be spent on insights generation or visualizing things. Oftentimes there's a real challenge between the language that data scientists speak and the language that decision makers or people that want to make an action are used to receiving information in. And so the degree to which we can move faster because we're able to get some assistance with the harder part, with the lower level stuff, can be very valuable. I think on our end, we've seen just a lot of growth in general in terms of projects that want to be, kind of participate on our platform in terms of usage as well. We are seeing lots of new data sets come online, and we don't promote this right now because we don't really have an effective way of kind of gating things, but we have an API, and there are a lot of researchers and data scientists that are using it and doing all sorts of unexpected things. Again, we don't rate limit anyone right now, and you have access to a lot of data. Yeah, hopefully we don't get in trouble after this live stream. But it's just kind of very interesting to see the types of things that people are experimenting with. And we, again, are very excited. Hopefully, maybe this market cycle, there will be more people that come in from other domains, be it finance, marketing, sports, and they want to work at the intersection of public goods funding and data science, because right now it is pretty lonely.
Absolutely, and I think we hear a lot of demand for a lot of wanting to see this, but I think sometimes it can be a bit scary as a builder too, in terms of how do you get started. It helps to have cohorts, and probably something on the support layer that could work. A shout out to Rohik, GM. I see your reply, Gabe and Sarah as well, and yeah, appreciate y'all and our regulars joining in. We have now hit 141 views, so really excited about that too. Bryce, do you want to tell us more about some of the wins on the EAS side and from your team from the last couple of months? And also, Carl, I do
Yeah.
want to say that I think like being default alive, by the way, like is such a big win, especially in this market. It's been so bearish, and with so much of funding drying up, I think a lot of builders will resonate with that quite a bit.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that too. You know, the first thing is just making sure that I think, you know, to Carl's point, like if you are building public goods for those listening to, it's just like really finding something that you're passionate about, like seeing, you know, to exist. Like a lot of these projects come from that point of passion, and you know, it can be discouraging even to see like different aspects of the market, like, you know, be overly extractive and really not contributing towards like the core vision of what Ethereum is actually trying to achieve. So I think like recent things have been nice to see, like just market validation, you know, of like renewed optimism in Ethereum overall is refreshing. Um, and so just surviving is like obviously a good win. But I think from like an impact perspective, something that we've been focused on is like for the past couple of years, our main focus is around like how do we help builders build faster? That's like any decision that we try to make, like from a product perspective, kind of anchors towards that theme. And one of the things that we've seen is like this heightened interest around zero knowledge proofs and like how do ZKPs and attestations work together, and like what use cases can be made from that and what does that unlock. And we've seen like hackathon teams and other builders try to like bring these two standards closer together, but it's like ZKPs are like you feel like you have to have a like you know a PhD in like cryptography to like get started, and like there's all these new terms, and it's like how does it work? Like what's a circuit? Like what do I use? And so a lot of builders like immediately just get stuck, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to like work on something else. And then on the attestation side, you know, that can be a new primitive for a lot of people too. And so like there's just a lot of complexity in that journey as a builder. And so we spent a lot of time talking to builders, talking to specifically open source providers of ZK tooling like Succinct, SP1, RIS0, the PSE team from the Ethereum Foundation and others, to really figure out like how do we actually build a very simple flow and just examples for devs who want to generate proofs from, you know, signed data. And so we just launched a playbook around that a couple of weeks ago, actually. And then with that, there's like some example tooling that allows you to generate a proof of an off-chain attestation, and kind of makes it easy. So you could do that in like 10 minutes. So that's a big win, because like using ZKPs and attestations just unlocks a whole new like realm of opportunity. Moving forward, what we're focused on is like really just listening more to the community on like what they want to see built. Some of it intentionally. The EAS protocol itself is very simple. We try not to Frankenstein the actual core contracts at all. We actually haven't really touched them since like they've launched, which is a good sign. But all the complexity kind of sits on top of it in the developer tooling and the ways that people want to use attestation. So we're really trying to listen to the community on what other types of tools they want to see. Something that we have heard is, and that I've seen, is like we have good docs. They can be a little bit overwhelming because there's just a lot of docs. And then like as soon as you start building, like making that a bit more personalized. So one thing that we're focused on is like exploring this concept around a developer studio that allows devs to go from idea to attestation a lot more easily. And so we're just like we're in the product discovery phase right now, just on like what actually needs to exist for that to be useful, and seeing kind of where that goes.
That's amazing. Yeah, ZKPs and attestations like that unlocks a whole different world as well. Rightly so, like you said. And with so much of our community and just the Ethereum ecosystem also just doubling down on zero knowledge proofs, I think that's I'm really, really curious to see what gets built first and what gets traction, just like, you know, the kind of use cases we're going to see, because there's so much of work and interest, and it seems like from the community as well. So that's going to be a really, really great one. And congrats on that launch. If you can actually share that playbook on Twitter as a reply to this live stream, that'll be great. So for everyone who's watching, you can check that out. And Hayden, over to you now. Tell us more about what your team has been cooking up over the last couple months, and what are some things on your roadmap that you'd like to share?
Yeah, for sure. We launched version 3 a couple of months ago. That was a big launch for us because that included not only modular encryption, so we've now kind of covered all the core concepts of database functionality, but it was also brought almost 10 years of development to completion, because we finally had a sort of feature complete piece of software that we could release to the development community. An extensive roadmap we have developed, and we're planning on working through those milestones. We've got a very extensive roadmap, mostly focused on expanding out our support of different programming languages, so we can bring in different types of developers, better mobile support, general improvements around just being able to roll out ORBDB databases at the moment. Any peer-to-peer technology is quite cumbersome to roll out, so one of our focuses is to make that easier for developers, so they can just get the data storage up and running, and they can then just run with it and start building their applications around it. And then it'll be 10. ORBDB will be 10 years old at the end of the year. So we've made it this far, so that people are still developing on it, and so there must be a use case for it. So it'll be good to hit the 10-year mark, and say ORBDB's lasted that long, and it's had a bumpy ride, but we're still here and we're still competing with other database platforms. So hopefully we can continue the momentum with the new roadmap.
Amazing. Well, congrats on the 10-year anniversary, and
Thank you.
I think a lot of times it's just about who can survive the longest with any project and with any space, even if it's competitive. I think like survival is the best gift you can give to your builders and to your community a lot of times. With that, we're coming close. We've got 2 minutes left to the live stream, and I hope we get one more person, then we can cross 160 people who will have watched the live stream. But for the last couple minutes, as we do wrap up, a reminder to everyone to please allocate. We have a couple more days left before the allocation window closes. Literally every person, the amount that changes in terms of like rankings, these changes go on up until the last minute sometimes, but every allocation decision can make a difference. So please consider supporting our projects and our builders here. Before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share with our community in terms of how an allocation can make a difference to your project? The floor is yours, and then we can wrap up after that. So I'll start with Hayden first, and then we can do Carl and Bryce in that order.
Well, yeah, being an open source project, and we're not attached to any definite funding streams. We don't have any venture capitalists behind us. We don't have any angel investors. Our funding comes just basically from the community, and I know that databases and so forth aren't the sexiest thing. There's a lot more interest in tokenization or things that people are much more interested in. Databases are probably pretty boring, but these database systems are very important to these ecosystems. And as we move more towards peer-to-peer and decentralization for various reasons that I won't go into, it'll become even more important that these technologies are developed, and that development doesn't come unless we keep funding these projects.
Absolutely, and thank you, Hayden. Carl, go for it.
Yeah, I think like my peers here, we're a small team, and we're bootstrapped, and so every cent, every way makes a difference. It allows us to keep some runway. It allows us to cover our fixed costs and so on. Again, I think that we're grateful to have been able to survive this relatively tough period for a lot of projects. And I think that supporting us shows that you value the work that we're doing. I also think that we're always self-conscious of how much funding we receive relative to the other projects, just given that we don't think it would ever make sense to pay a evaluator, you can see us that way more than you're paying the most impactful projects. And so we always like to kind of be somewhere near the middle of the pack, or ideally overshined by lots of other more deserving projects. And so if you do come in, we'd be grateful for your support, but also make sure that you do your own research and look at all the other projects that are there. It's such a good group of projects. You really can't go wrong with funding any of them, except EAS. Don't fund them for sure. Just kidding.
I can piggyback off that. I will echo what Carl says, not everything, but about 95% of what he said. It's working on public goods it's amazing to work on because you can see the impact that you can make for Ethereum, but it's a long-term gain. And they're being able to support and having these programs like Octant to be able to support and allow builders like us, Carl, Hayden, and his community to be able to work on things that we believe are impactful for the future of Ethereum is incredibly important. And so as Carl was saying, every GUI, every cent, every dollar really matters and allows us to ship a bit more confidently that we can afford to do things. And so your contributions do make a difference. And it's not put $5 in and get $10 out, but that you're really adding kind of a multiplier to the success of Ethereum. And I think another thing that supporting Octant more broadly and this specific cohort is that you're also signaling I keep saying the Ethereum strategic reserve, right? The strategic Ethereum reserve. And Octant is one of the main contributors that's actually donating back to the ecosystem to help it grow and to actually burn more ETH. And so I think if Octant is successful and the teams that you support actually are pushing Ethereum forward, then it does create this flywheel where more capital comes in and can be really easy for projects like Carl's Mine and Hayden's to actually grow and expand our teams and stuff like that. So just choose the projects that you think are most impactful to the vision that you want to see Ethereum achieve, and then just stay active supporting them. And it doesn't have to be money either. With your vote too, I think something that's awesome too is just hearing from teams that are using the protocols and stuff. So I'm excited to just any sort of contribution back is really appreciated.
One plug that I'll say just for Octant, I know that we're probably over time, but it's for Octant, so maybe it's a good cause. One of the things that we really appreciate as a project is that it's a very positive sum dynamic. I mean that in a few ways. Number one, I think the goal is to grow the number of institutions and individuals that are staking and using that yield to fund public goods. And so when we do sessions like this, I think the goal is less to market our own projects and more to excite others to come in and stake and grow the pie, grow the pool so that more public goods can be funded. I think another thing which is great is that a lot of ecosystems or other grant programs, I should say, they ask a lot of projects in order to get funding. There's a lot of time that goes into applications, marketing, et cetera. And I know that Octant has always been very builder focused and not just helping provide funding, but providing other in-kind support like marketing, like being able to look at our logo and suggest improvements and so on, which for a small team is super, super valuable. So I really just appreciate the dynamics that you've created and the deep builder focus. It's very special. Mm-hmm. I think that you've had a really outsized impact relative. You've given a large amount of funding, but even relative to others, you've had an outsized impact for that funding.
Thank you, Carl. We really appreciate that, and we've noticed that it I think for projects and for builders to succeed, this actually came out from a lot of the research that we've invested into. Part of the work that we do that we don't shine as much light on, unless you are in the grant allocator space, then you've probably interacted with some part of the research that we have funded, but it is to figure out how to improve programs, how to improve builder and ecosystem support. And one of the findings that we came to in conclusions was that, again, a lot of times smaller teams will not have excessive cash to fund a lot of these aspects. So we try to offer as much non-financial support as we can in addition to the Epoch funding for that. And we're still learning because there's there are going to be mistakes. There's going to be learnings. We're trying to grow and help as best as we can. But it really helps to hear positive feedback around a lot of the things we're experimenting with, and then, you know, adding resources towards. So that is, yeah, that always feels great. I think to wrap up, yes, please do allocate. And I think a great way to allocate is also just lock more GLM and have more rewards. We're going to be back with more epochs and more updates. I see one of the replies here being, when will Octant V2 Epoch 9 Q4 be live? We have a lot to share on that front. I can't share it yet, but I can say that there are going to be some surprises around DevConnect. So, you know, stay tuned on our timelines. We're going to be sharing a lot more, even in terms of our own V2 roadmap. The vaults are obviously the first step towards sharing some of our launches. We're going to have a lot more of demos, and the whole point of V2 is really to share more around sustainable growth and the fact that projects, and especially important projects, impactful ones, like all of yours, can get funded in a way that is positive sum and it's not zero impact. We're hoping that other ecosystems also really see the point of all of this. There's a lot of interesting and exciting case studies we've got coming up from our past epochs and from projects too, that we hope will instill more confidence and will have people actually consider V2 and to move funding to projects in a way that is sustainable and that can help projects grow. But a lot of good things coming up. Thank you so much, everyone. We did cross 160. We're actually 169 now. So
Oh, nice.
really,
That's a good one. We can stop there.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good one. I feel like if we just keep talking, we'll go to 170, and I'll be like, yay! But just, you know, I'll take the wins that we can get.
For sure.
But thanks so much for joining in. We have a surprise session that we are going to be announcing. Y'all are the first ones to hear it, with L2 Beat on Sunday morning. So that's going to be giving a demo on how to use L2 Beat. And again, I think a lot of people feel intimidated going onto the platform and thinking, hey, I know that these are great metrics. How do we make sense of them? So that session is really to break that down. So if you have been curious about the stages that different L2s are at, what a lot of these words mean, a big focus internally is obviously to make things accessible for our community, but that session is going to be specifically focused on that. So please do join us on a Sunday morning. It'll be great. And if you can't join, we're going to have a recording up, so you can watch it on our YouTube channel or on Twitter. Thank you, Bryce, Carl, and Hayden, and Nico for joining, for sharing all of your thoughts. We are so bullish in all of your projects. We have been excited to support y'all, and we wish you the best of luck from the Octant team and from our community in this epoch.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Good seeing you guys. Bye.